evening to everyone. It is 9 o'clock and some other folks may be trying to get on, but I do think we have a quorum. So I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order with the understanding that we may have folks joining. Just as a reminder, we have a really limited time of 1 hour for our meetings. And so we'll need to move expeditiously through our agenda, and I'll definitely try to facilitate that, but please keep that in mind. Also, it looks like everybody's familiar with their mute button, but if you happen to have a lot of background noise and you're not speaking, that can be helpful just to keep the space as free of noise clutter as possible. So welcome to you all. It's good to see you and hear you. First, I would like to just address public comment. So we haven't received any written requests for public comment. Is there anyone attending today who would like to speak? And this will be this is the opportunity, excuse me, this is the opportunity for any public comment. So then as we're moving through the agenda, we'll need to move through the agenda items and we won't be coming back for public comment beyond this time now. So I'll open that up. Is there anyone present who'd like to speak?
Should we approve the minutes first?
Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped an item. Thank you, Barb. Okay, I had my note on public comment and jumped to it. So first we'll have the approval of the minutes. We have minutes from August 13th. Any changes or additions?
July 16th.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, from July 16. Misspoke. And I had a couple, but anybody else have some? Anyone besides me have changes?
No.
Okay. Under Ecola Creek Forest Reserve update, and the second paragraph, the last sentence and the last, just a section of that sentence where it says, let the public know what we have accomplished. That next clause, I think just to clarify what I was intending to say there was to let them know what we've accomplished, the process of the update with Trout Mountain, and then the sentence can go on. So it would just be striking and give them access to the observation and the reserve, because that wasn't clear in terms of what I was intending there. So can we just make that amendment?
I don't understand what it is you want me to add and take out. I'm sorry, because that was, are you saying take out the rest of that sentence?
No, if you just take out the words and give them access to the observation in the reserve. And so the sentence would read, okay, let the public know what we have accomplished, the update process with Trout Mountain, and let them know things we're considering going forward. Then the rest of the sentence as it is.
Okay.
And then I had one other change under, it was right at the end of that section, in the very last sentence before the community grant section, in that last sentence. So it would read, we'll draft an addendum to the plan for the committee's review, and strike to move both along at the public meeting. The addendum wasn't intended for the public meeting. So we'll draft an addendum to the plan for the committee's review.
I got that.
Thanks. Any other changes? Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes.
I second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. Now public comment.
I don't think you have any, Jelaine.
Okay, great, thank you. state of the parks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to talk about the last 4 weeks. Good morning. So this is a report for the last 4 weeks. The local group is having a concert in the park tonight. That'll be the 4th time that they've played every other Thursday. The Tolovana Arts Colony is sponsoring a concert on August 30th. And in the last concert they had, Arts Colony, a couple of weeks ago, was Erotic City, and it was, according to Andrew, it's one of the biggest turnouts they've ever had. Of course, there's nothing else to do, so it was successful, and people were social distance and masked up and everything. Everyone had a good time. That's kind of one positive thing about the summer. Joe and I have been doing landscape maintenance citywide. We're kind of getting caught up. We fell behind during the first couple of months of COVID, but that's about all we've done all month. The baseball, soccer field, the playground remain closed. Tolovana Wayside is very busy, as you've all noticed, I'm sure, but there's no issues that I know of. Akola State Park opened last weekend. Trevor and I did a knotweed survey around town, and we're talking to a technician who will be here in September to do we're going to get back on our knotweed control program. Last week, my colleagues went up to the ECFR footpath and cleared the last few blowdowns from last winter off the trail, so the footpath's wide open. And they're going up today to check out what they need to do from the end of the footpath up to Burn Road and down to the West Fork, if they want to mow it or how they're going to look at that. I haven't been up there for a little while, but 3 of them went up there with the chainsaws and took care of it last week. So that is all I have. I'll answer any questions or whatever.
Hi, this is Karen. I would like to just add kind of a status in case you guys have already heard or you hear something about this. We're picking up a fair amount of human feces throughout the community. There's 5 or 6 locations that seem to be at the regular spot that people are using. Our wastewater workers sent me a text of some photos of around our pump stations where people are actually doing this. For whatever reason, they're afraid to use the public bathrooms, so they're doing this out in the common area. And, Public Works as a whole, myself in particular, are trying to manage these locations. I'm picking up probably 10 to 15 piles weekly at a minimum. Sometimes it's much more than that if we've had a busy weekend. It's concerning to me because, as you guys know, where this stuff ends up, depending on where they're doing this is near some of our open storm drain areas, and I've let our city leadership know that. This may come up in a work session at council meeting, but I've let Bruce know that I'm concerned about this. I'm not sure what we can do about it other than just try to manage it and pick it up before it ends up in the drain. But if you guys hear about it, just know that I'm aware and we're trying to manage this issue the best we can.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Karen, would it be useful to put a sign with a map of where the public restrooms are near where people are doing this, just in case they're doing it because they don't know where to go?
No, people clearly know some of these are near our public restrooms, so that is not the issue in any form or fashion. People just are afraid to go in and use a public restroom at this time of year with the COVID. It's clear that that's why they're doing it. I just don't know how to stop it, and another sign is not going to help that. But I do appreciate that perspective. It's problematic and it's very concerning to me.
Yeah, I've got a question. Is the city able to do more regular cleanings of the restrooms? I'm wondering if there's some assurance that we might be able to offer if those restrooms are being cleaned on a more frequent basis, or just something that could help allay some of the concerns people may have?
From the very beginning of COVID, we amped up our frequency of cleaning and trash receptacle emptying just because of the sheer volume that we were seeing. The bathrooms are being cleaned on the average about every hour and a half. So cleaning and supplies availability and tidiness is not the issue either. People just have in their mind that they don't want to use a public restroom, and shy of someone just being physically around the area. Some of these areas are in a wide open space that I don't know how they're doing it not being seen. I've witnessed 2 people that I called the police on that were literally doing it with me standing there watching them. And when I mentioned it to both of these individuals that was against the law, what they were doing, they both told me they did not want to use a public bathroom. And so I don't know how to stop it other than people just getting cited by the police. But like I say, one of the areas was right across from the haystack stairs going down to the rock in the middle of the day. So.
Also, our cleaning crew has doubled its manpower this summer. They used to always want a one-man crew, 10 or 12 hours. Now it's 2 guys, and they're on it pretty good.
They're working their tailbones off, yeah.
Yeah, well, appreciate that. And my only thought is if there's a way of publicizing that or making that fact known, that the frequency of cleaning is, that it's much more frequent, and that might allay some concerns. But that's the only thing I can think of. And thanks for letting us know about it.
Yeah, I did a interview with the press about the trash and, what we're seeing this summer as a whole because of COVID. I know Rick mentioned it in his emergency management broadcast and the things that we're doing to manage COVID. I'm not sure what more I can do, Facebook or our website or something like that, I guess, to tell people how often we're cleaning our bathrooms, but yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next item is Ecola Creek Forest Reserve Plan update. So you should all have received the PDF of a draft of slides for the presentation. I put together based on the outline that we've discussed in our previous work sessions. Because time is of the essence, and we've got other topics I think we're going to need to spend some time on today. What I wanted to propose today is just going through very succinctly through the slides. I have a couple of questions and things to point out, and then other members of the committee, if you have thoughts about content for these slides or questions for each of the slides, we could briefly address that going through. We have a public presentation scheduled for September 22nd, and I also have a thought about how we might facilitate that, but I'll hold that until we've gone through the content of the slides. So does that seem like a reasonable way to proceed? Going through, are there other thoughts or questions more general before we dive in?
No, that's a good approach.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned in my in the email, this is really intended as an outline, like a talking point outline. In my experience with PowerPoint presentations, it's helpful. I have found it helpful both as a viewer and as a presenter to leave the really fine detail for the verbal presentation and let people get images and the key talking points on the slides. And I think that's also especially applicable here because people will have access they have access to the stewardship plan, and they will, when it's finalized, be able to view the update and see any of these topics in more detail, as well as ask questions about them. So with that in mind, the first couple of slides are more introductory. On page 3, we need a photo here. I'll just point out the places where I didn't have photos. So if you have one you think would fit or can lay hands on one that would be available to use, that would be great. And I want to just pause before we get going further and just thank Scott Recate because he provided a whole bunch of these photos from his time up in the reserve and really appreciate that. So I think page 3 is pretty self-evident. We'll just talk about the process with Trout Mountain, the 5-year update, kind of our process, the steps that we go through in this 5-year review, and that we're at the public presentation, and then recommendations to council. I'll just pause, see if anyone has questions. Okay.
Shalane, this is
yes.
Karen. Just logistically, if you could number your slides. I know with council, they've commented on this when people do prezos that if you could
Right.
number the slide, it's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I did not, don't think you have that on the PDF. I have it here. So yeah, I'll apologize for that. So I will say the title of the slide as we move through. So next one is, what is the ECFR? A description and history, and I think we can get this information from the original plan. This slide is more an orienting slide. The next one, oops, I think I got myself turned around. Yeah, page 5 would be a little more in-depth information, history. So here I think we can get a lot of this information from the original plan. However, if anybody on the committee has a particular interest or background knowledge from the time that you would like to provide some bullet points or some specific things that we want to include there, that would be great. I do think there is an overview in the original plan that has much of this information. So the next slide, partnerships and agreements, another one where we'll need a photo. I think we could talk very briefly about OWEB, our responsibilities and agreements, the easements, the agreements that the city engaged with OWEB in terms of the acquisition of the land, and then how Parks and Community Services intersects with that in terms of our reviews and recommendations. Anything on the introduction sections? Okay. The next slide is what makes the ECFR different. Following that, not like other wilderness areas. So just pointing out that while as you may enter the area, it may look like other wilderness areas, but just pointing out as part of our larger watershed, that it's really a unique opportunity to engage in rainforest restoration projects and with a view to long-term stewardship. Next is the ECFR stewardship plan, talking a little bit more detail about the history, the original plan development, the aspect of community input, that there was a lot of community input on that original plan, where to find it on the city website, so folks are aware of it and that they can access that. And then speaking to each of those bullet points you see there. Anything to add there? And again, I would just say if any member has a particular interest or would like to hone in on this and provide some of the detailed information for the talking points on this, that would be great. So just be thinking if that's something you'd like to do. The next slide is the mission of stewardship section. So this is talking, and then following that, goals and priorities in the ECFR, another one that we could use a photo for. Highlighting that the goals, the 4 pillars of priorities in the ECFR were established in the original plan and haven't changed. And then specifying what those are. And just highlighting that those 4 priorities guide all the activity and the decisions that we make regarding activity in the ECFR. You probably recognize the next one is just that visual upside down pyramid, showing maybe a proportional relationship of the activities there. The slide 13 is just, I think, a little framing slide that, well, each of these categories look like distinct categories. Of course, in any ecosystem, everything's connected. And one thing affects another thing. So that's part of the mission of stewardship, is considering the totality and really trying to, as much as possible, take a long range view and think about the impact of any individual project on the whole. Anything on that section? Okay, project status. Keep an eye on my time here. Project status, I was wondering if we, maybe a better title for that slide for this section might be highlights from the first 5 years, but we aren't going to be talking about every action item in this report. People can certainly look at that in the update. So anybody have a thought about that? Would highlights be a better way to frame this?
Yeah, I think so.
Agree.
Yep, okay, so we'll call that highlights from the first 5 years.
Mhm.
Okay. And then the next one is projects 2013 to 2018. We can mention that there were 23 proposed action items in the original plan, that they fall into these 4 areas, and that we want to highlight some of the key accomplishments here. And of course, that folks can find more detail on the update and addenda. Following is forest restoration. So here we could talk about the conifer thinning, both the sections that were done, the replanting that was done, and also the results of the road inventory and assessment, the conclusions regarding feasibility of thinning using that method and of the more commercial thinning methods. And we can also let folks that we're going to talk more about this when we talk about some proposed pilot projects or alternatives, but we can give them the update on that. And then the following slide is just a photo. It shows some of the replant areas. It shows one of the roads that was surveyed. Anything there? Okay. Under fish habitat, the snorkel survey that was completed, I know we got an email with the results early in the spring or late winter. And I need to go back and look. I'm not sure if that was completed in the fall of 19 or if it was completed in the early winter of 2020, that snorkel survey. But I'm sure we can go back and clarify that. And I wonder if anybody would be interested in summarizing the results or just having a couple of talking points about the snorkel survey from the information that we received. Any takers?
I'll do it.
Great, thanks, Luann. And if you don't have it at hand, I can point you to the information that we received from them. And I think just some couple of brief points, because again, people can look in more depth. We can point them to more detailed information. We can let them know about the large woody debris placement. I believe there were 3 areas that was completed in. Speak to the specifics of those, and also the function of slowing down the stream and how that improves habitat for fish and the purpose of that. We posted angler regulations at the creek and also at the kiosks, and just that ongoing angler education is a part of that activity.
Could I put in a request? Would you send us again the snorkel results? I'm sure you sent that out when we got it, but I wouldn't know where to look for it at the moment.
Yeah, I think that was Karen. Can you
Karen, could you do that?
clarify? I think that was in an email.
Yeah, it was.
Where,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll go back and look. I think it was in an email, and I think we finished that in 2019.
Yeah, and it was sent to you guys in an email form.
right.
If you don't have it, I can resend it.
We'll
Yeah.
resend it to you, to the team.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate that. So anything else on fish habitat we want to talk about? Okay. Moving on, water quality. This is actually a beautiful little video. It just shows up as a photograph here, but it's a very short, maybe a minute long video that Scott made inside the woods, deep in the woods on a beautiful kind of dappled sunny day. You can hear birds singing, you can hear water flowing. It's just, and then he kind of took the camera and just went in a circle. So you're looking at the trees and the ferns and the light coming through. It's just beautiful. So I thought that might be a nice thing to play. We can just talk very briefly about water quality is connected to all of these different things, and that when you have a healthy rainforest and good wildlife habitat, you've got a good water system. Kind of a reminder of the it's all connected piece. So we could just play that while we're talking, I think, in the background. Next is the public access section. Some of the highlights, certainly the kiosks, the footpath, the signage updates, and this is since 2013. We may want to add just highlighting that there was a entry gate placed on the Tolovana Burn Road. The no hunting policy was completed and put in shape, and then put in place. And then we also received the Forest Stewardship Council certification during this time. And I'm not as familiar with that. I don't know if any of you are more familiar with that certification. Is that something we want to speak about more?
I think just making sure everybody knows we received the certification is all that's necessary.
Okay. Okay, great. Let's see, where are we?
Just curious, I don't remember about that. Who certified it, or us?
Well, it is, I am not familiar with it specifically, but in the plan update, Barry notes that one of the things that was completed was the Forest Stewardship Council's certification, and that certification was received. So from the Forest Stewardship Council. So that's something we could look into more and speak to, or be able to answer questions about if those come up. Next slide is new in the updated plan. I spent a few slides talking about this new section on fire risk assessment and management. I think, so the following slide is fire risk management, managing risk through stewardship. Just highlighting that both with the changing conditions with climate, increased activity, and that the city and committee requested that Trout Mountain do an assessment of fire risk in the reserve, as it wasn't really on the radar in the same way 5 years ago. And specifically with an eye to the impact of any projects or activity that we would have going on up there and how that would impact fire risk. The next slide is fire risk management. So I just broke these down. We aren't going to be able to cover this in a whole lot of detail, but highlighting the factors that increase risk. Some we have control over, some we don't. The climate change certainly impacting previous logging practices. And I think when we're talking about the history of the reserve, we can point out that there are really distinct different sections of the reserve. Part of it is land that was logged and has quite a monoculture kind of growth, and some of it very old, and just highlight the variety of that, and that also impacts with fire risk. And then human presence activity is certainly increasing risk. And I just made the note there that at least 96% of wildfires are human caused. Anything anyone wants to add or speak to specifically there?
Jelaine, this is Karen.
Yeah.
We have 5 slides associated with this particular topic, but what you can talk about is relatively limited at this stage of the game. I would suggest just combining that into one slide that's titled, fire risk management, and then you speak to those items instead of having 5 different slides. You have almost 40 slides in your total presentation. I think you're going to need to pare it way down.
Yeah,
So
okay.
instead of having so many slides on one topic, you can make a slide with 3 key bullet points and then speak to the content.
Okay.
So you can pare your overall prezo down.
Yeah, I
Just,
think.
just
and-
food for thought.
Yep, thanks. A good note. And I think, if we can't get it down to one, I think I could certainly take that note and reduce it and speak about factors that increase risk, factors that reduce risk, and the thinking of the community, the direction we're looking at with that. Any other comment about that piece? Does that seem like a reasonable direction to go? Okay. The next slide I have here, so we won't think about these necessarily as all individual slides, but just more as content points. Fire risk management, the factors decreasing risk, reduced human presence. We can speak here about the diverse ecosystem that already exists. Barry really noted that we've got some natural fire breaks that are just part of the topography and the natural features of the reserve, and that those really play a role. And then the final one on this section is the management recommendations. So we may not need a specific slide to this, but we could speak to it, and then folks can look for more detail when we have our addendum to the update, which will include our recommendations. So do you think we want to keep a specific slide for the recommendations, or just do those verbally and then condense the other slides?
I think having a recommendation one is important. There are 2 different subjects. There is, what it is and then what's recommended. So it seems like 2 slides.
Okay.
I think it's
Concur on
great to
that?
highlight what has happened in the last 5 years, but I think the most crucial part of this is to talk about what you're going to do over the next coming 5 years.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where I'd put your meat and potatoes more so than talking about the past.
Okay. So we'll shoot for 2 slides, 3 max, but I'm going to try to get that down to 2, and we'll have a chance to look at those before we get to the presentation. So looking ahead is the next slide, proposed projects and recommendations. Now I have a question here. Would it be helpful and or appropriate to mention COVID, because the effects of COVID are far reaching just in terms of budgets and proposed plans, and is that something that we want to speak to in the presentation, just as a note that we see directions that we may want to go forward, and also recognizing that constraints may be different in these coming few years? Or is that something that doesn't need to be included?
I don't think COVID has impact on this, budget or otherwise.
Just in terms of
Go ahead, Barb.
resources available.
But
Okay.
I was just going to say it's COVID has definitely curtailed our committee's active participation in this presentation. It's very difficult to do this on Zoom. So I mean, just a brief mention that it has slowed our progress down a bit.
Okay.
And Jelaine has done most of the work.
Yeah.
All of the work,
Yeah.
which we appreciate.
All the discussions were mutual, so I'm being more the scribe, but yeah, happy to. Thank you. Okay, so it sounds like we don't need to mention it, mentioned it in a broader context. So that sounds great. So looking ahead then about.
Definitely changed the dynamic. It's definitely changed the dynamics of how your team has been able to meet or work together on this, but it's no different than any other committee or project has already experienced, and everybody's had to find ways to adapt to it. But as far as budget associated with what you guys can do in the reserve, it has no bearing.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a helpful clarification. That's great. Okay.
And I just frame it that way, because I think your
Sure.
greater audience is gonna kind of look at that as a, you know, woe's me kind of a comment, and they're gonna look at that as saying, everybody else has had to work through it and adapt to it, you guys should do the same. And I'd really just focus on what your charter is going forward, and I wouldn't necessarily put a whole lot of emphasis on the fact that this COVID thing has slowed you guys down.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically,
my
it
thought
has, and I can appreciate it.
Yeah, my thought originally wasn't in relation to the committee. It was just that it, of course, has introduced a lot of uncertainty more generally into planning for all kinds of things. And so, of course, we are, you know, looking ahead at projects, and that will get clearer in time as things unfold. But I don't think really from the conversation right now that it even needs to be mentioned. So I don't think there's any need particularly to mention it in relation to the committee at all. So we can just,
Yeah, 'cause from a budget perspective, I'll tell you guys, I'm gonna look at this as an essential, focus, just like I would our infrastructure or anything else that needs to be cared for. This is no less than any of those other priorities to us. So you guys need to know when it comes to budget, I plan on asking just like I would passionately about anything else.
great. Okay, thank you. That was really my question with that. So, okay, forging ahead, looking ahead, I've noted some projects in forest restoration, primarily support for the existing replant areas. Talked about some of the things Barry noted that we can do with small crews going in where it's accessible to keep some of the young hemlock cleared, the brush cleared, just supporting the new plantings, and invasive species management where needed, and then monitoring and evaluating progress. Next is also in forest restoration, the proposed pilot project to consider blackberries in particular, looking at selected areas, primarily where we might be doing some other projects, that these might be areas if we're clearing an area for whatever purpose or working with an area that might introduce the opportunity for blackberries. So that might be a good place to also work with a pilot project to see what's the most effective mechanical and manual methods, thinking of it in terms of control versus eradication, and then really including an effectiveness evaluation component. So we're getting data on, does it work? How does it work, et cetera. Okay, moving on, the forest restoration, another pilot project, possible, oh, another photo we could use here. You know, this was discussed more recently when we were talking with Barry that second time in February, but there was a brief discussion of possibly looking at doing a 1 acre or a very small area feasibility study using the drop and disperse method to see is it feasible? What does it look like cost-wise? It certainly is a lower risk method in terms of fire hazard, and it's a lower risk in terms of, it's a lower budgetary commitment, I believe, when you start figuring in roads. So that's another pilot project we can talk about, but I wanted to pause and see, is this something you guys want to include? Because we did just have a shorter conversation about it in February.
I think even though we didn't discuss it a lot, that it's still a viable project and could tie into other things. I would leave it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I'm remembering that we were talking about whatever you cut down, have it not lying on the ground with a lot of oxygen, a lot of air in between to have it more compact and therefore less flammable.
Following those recommendations and then just seeing, is this a feasible way to think about thinning if we need to do that down the road, if that's something that's decided that it would be good to happen. I'm thinking about this next 5 years really as an opportunity to get a lot more information and to do some evaluation of methods and see, so as people are considering projects going forward, they'll have some good information to base it on. The next one is fish habitat. So possibly doing additional woody debris placement. We're going to talk a little bit more about beaver restoration, but I noted that here, and then, you know, continuing with snorkel surveys and fishing regulation reviews. The next slide is beaver restoration. And we had some more, that opened up as a topic a little bit more again towards the end of our review. We could speak a little bit about habitat and forage and how beaver impact the ecosystem and what a benefit they are in lots of different dimensions in the rainforest. But I also wanted to see, is there information about potential partnerships or potential grants that we want to include here? So I'd like your thoughts on that, and if so, what?
I haven't heard anything, so I don't know.
I know, Barb, you were involved with the grant, initial round of grant application and then conversations after, but is there anything that we want to add here?
That committee hasn't met, and there's a new director for the Watershed Council, so there's been nothing that has happened.
Okay, would it be, could we say that there's been some initial exploration with partnerships and some looking at available grants, and keep it a little more general, but just to know that those conversations have started and will continue going forward?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Okay. Okay, the next slide is signage and kiosks. I think we can talk about our proposal to consolidate, you know, noting that we had those great initial kiosks and then signs have accumulated as information has changed over time. So one of the things we want to do is clarify that, consolidate the signage, and really with a focus on clarity, orienting people and providing the most important information about the watershed up there. Anything to add there? Okay. This next slide is, oh, yes?
Hey, Delane, Kirk was going to say something.
Yeah, yes.
One thing, back to the kiosk. Are
Yes.
you there?
Yep.
I've seen a lot of places, like in state parks or rest areas, where the kiosks, depending on where they're located, you can have signage on both sides. And the first kiosk coming into it's crowded on the front and the back's empty, but the back's very accessible and visible. Just a thought.
Utilize the back.
Yeah, thank you. I think we can, yeah, utilize the space. Think about maybe even if we want to look at double panel. I think it depends partly on what we really want to include there. But yeah, I think utilizing the space would be great on both sides. Anything else? Okay. That fostering stewardship together slide, just kind of a framing for the last part of the discussion and for the public comments. I think I'm just noting that, having an understanding on the part of the community about what this space is, why it's different than other spaces, the function of the, there are some limits in terms of access up there, and that they're really supporting this broader vision, and that the community can really support the city and the community in achieving that. So that's the idea behind that slide. And then on your comments, I think, Karen, am I correct that we can have a dedicated email address for people to send in comments, that it would just be for this particular project?
Yeah, we can establish an email if you guys want to do like that.
Okay, that'd be great. Letting people know that they can certainly comment at at our next meeting, and when that is. I don't know if phone is an option. I didn't include that because I don't know if that would end up, taxing staff resources more than is reasonable.
I'll have Rusty establish an email, and then I'll talk to him about one of you guys manning that email, see what we can do on that.
Okay, great, thank you. And this kind of brings me to a question I have about the presentation itself. So I've been thinking about, as Barb noted, this is really a unfamiliar and a kind of cumbersome way to try to create a joint presentation that's the culmination of work everybody's been involved in for a good chunk of time. And given that, I wondered if a way to do this presentation that is to record it, is to pre-record it. It would give us the opportunity to have something that people can access online that is available over, we can have it available for as long as we deem would be, appropriate. I think that would meet our obligation to have a public presentation or a public information, and then encouraging people to send us their comments, to attend the October meeting, to share any thoughts that they have, so that we can include those. I think both in terms of the process of creating the presentation and also just the actual presenting of it, I think that might simplify things and provide something that people can access going forward. So I wanted to propose that and see what everybody thinks about that and if that would work. So we'd be
Sounds like a
Who
good
are
idea
you
to me.
thinking is gonna do the video?
I'm sorry?
Who are you thinking is gonna do the actual video? Who's recording the video?
Well, I think I'm wondering, and I'm not the technical expert here by any means, but I wondered if what it would basically be would be the slideshow with an audio overlay, the audio of the, for each of the slides. And if that can be done, recorded and then offered as a presentation online.
Well, I mean, logistically, Jelaine, the only way I can see this happening is that you guys actually divide up these topics. And as you guys were going through the slides, it looks like you have 4 distinctive topics here that you're talking about the future. And in order just to get your presentation finalized so that you could do an actual recording, you're going to have to divvy this up. I mean, you've got forest restoration, fish habitat, beaver restoration, and signage kiosks. To put the meat behind your slides, you should divvy those topics up amongst your team so that each of you have some responsibility of finalizing the presentation and getting it to a point where then you could divvy up the actual voice that goes with the presentation, unless you're just going to designate one person to talk through the entire thing. But that's going to take some time just to get that done in order to conduct a video, or as you suggest, the voice behind the slides.
Yeah.
You got to get your presentation done, and you guys are far from having it complete. So in order to do that by October and to be able to have a nice finalized, video recording, if you will, it's going to take some time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we were working within the parameters of having one work session, this being that work session. So I've been trying to move forward as expeditiously as possible from July to now. But I agree, it's not ideal, and it would certainly be helpful if we could have, either if we extend the timeout a little bit, or if we are able to have an interim meeting to discuss. And I think that, my thought around pre-recording it is it just adds it removes one level of complexity in terms of trying to coordinate everybody in a live presentation over Zoom with the public. So it's just trying to, reduce our degrees of complexity there a little bit. So I'll open it up, see what other people think.
So let me ask you something. Would you be agreeable? I think I heard Luann earlier take some ownership on the fish habitat piece. What if you assign that particular topic and the meat associated with these slides to Luann and let her work with Scott Ricky on that, since he's very knowledgeable, and then take the rest of those topics and divvy them up amongst the rest of the team, however you guys want to. Then let those folks complete those slides, bring it back to the committee for review and editing and finalizing at the September meeting. Having more meetings is not the solution here, because as you guys know, we are down 2 administrative staff members, and Jennifer is performing 3 separate jobs right now. So Bruce has asked all the city leadership to keep their committee meetings at a minimum of what's reasonable that all of us can balance with everything that's happening right now. So adding more meetings for you to use as a work session is not going to be the solution at this time.
Okay, thanks.
You're going to have to divvy up the work, actually do the work, and then come back and have the team edit that so that we're making some progress.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Okay, so I think that's great. That's one of the questions I wanted to bring to the committee, is how you want to go forward in terms of divvying up this information. And I also note our time here, and we've got another important topic to address today. So.
And we have a hard stop at 10 o'clock. So
Yes, I
your
understand.
community grants will probably have to occur in September. So let's actually make some decisions on this topic first, so we can put that to bed, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do with community grants.
So what I'd like to propose, and Karen, I do think it's important that we at least address a little bit where we need to go with community grants next, because time is, I recognize time is just very, very precious, and resources are precious. So in terms of the ECFR, is it agreeable to folks, even though we have certainly been trying to wrap this up, that we take it and push it back another month and give ourselves another month to come back to this in our regular meeting, with the understanding that we might, if everyone is agreeable, we can divide up some of this work for the detailed slide content.
I'd be
Yes.
glad to do what Karen suggested on the fish. However, I can't do these slide stuff. I don't know how to do any of that stuff,
Okay.
but I can do the work.
Let's just talk about the content. Let's not talk about the presentation so much, but just if we were to divide up these these slides or these sections, so that each of the members can track down the talking points for each one of those. Is that something that we can agree to?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. And then at our next meeting, perhaps we can talk about the actual presentation, what makes sense for that, because each of us will be more familiar with the talking points for a particular section. And if it works logistically with the meeting, I'd be happy to conduct some emails via Jen, so that we can outline what those sections are, and then have people volunteer to take one on. Is that a good way to go forward?
Yeah, when we're talking about the 4 categories, is this forest restoration, fish habitat, water quality, and public access?
Yeah, we can, I think it can get divided up that way. We also have history of the reserve. We've got the last 5 years, and then we have the looking ahead. So really there are 3 chunks. And within that, we're just talking about projects in those 4 categories. What's been done in those 4 categories, what we're looking at to do in those 4 categories. It's actually three actively, so. So just so that we can
Okay, so the
use our
four
time.
categories that I'm seeing, that you guys should be focusing on is forest restoration, fish habitat, beaver restoration, and signage and kiosks. That's what you're talking about that you're gonna do going forward.
Yes,
Jelaine,
those
you
are the,
pretty much have everything about the past history. And the stewardship plan tells you what we've been doing already up to the last 5 years. So that's the easy part. The hard part is talk about what you're gonna do going forward, and you just outlined those four topics: the signage, the beaver, the fish, and the forest restoration. That's what you need to divvy up amongst the team to get the meat behind those slides.
okay, does that seem like a reasonable way to go forward?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll follow up with an email to Jen and she'll pass it out and then we'll see how we can best select those, take on a topic, and then we'll move the presentation date back to October. So we're not working
Okay,
to
wait.
September 22nd.
Jelaine, what I'm asking you to do today is decide who's taking those topics on before we adjourn the meeting. So let's talk about that right now. Who's gonna take those four topics so that we know when you guys adjourn, those folks are working on that before you come back to the next meeting.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely
need
be
to do
doing
that
that. Let me
today.
just pause, if I could just pause for a moment. We do have our community grants and we had a plan to have those numbers approved and sent to council next month. I would like now, because we're clearly not going to have time to address that in this meeting, and I think there are likely some questions and some discussion that we're going to want to have around that. I know I certainly have some questions to address with that. So may we agree to set that back for a month so that we can have an opportunity to address that at our next meeting and have a full conversation.
I think we need to do that.
And I think it should be first on the agenda.
Agreed. So we'll put that top of the agenda next time and we'll move that back a month. And I know that delays it a bit with the awards, but I think it's well worth it because we're in a different process and we've got some questions that have come up. Okay, thank you. So we'll do that. Now, coming back to assigning the different sections. Do any of, Luann, you said you would do the fish habitat.
Sure.
So we have forest restoration, we have the public access kiosk signage. And we have water quality, which we don't have specific tasks. We don't have specific projects. That's really a result of the culmination of all of them. So am I missing any here?
I'll take either water quality or signage, whichever seems. If you've got somebody who wants one of those, I'll take the other.
Barb, do you have a thought?
I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure I have the time to do it right now.
Okay. Okay. Then really what I'd like to propose,
good
because
job.
I think we have an outline of what we need to do. And in terms of where we need to assign some of these, and I think we need some clarity on what those sections are. So what I'd like to do is do an email to everyone through Jen that outlines what we just talked about. It'll be very brief, and then a place that you can respond, clarifying Luann's going to do the fish habitat. We'll clarify those other areas, and then we'll make a plan at our next meeting for how we want to actually tackle the presentation itself. Is that agreed?
Okay.
And everybody can, understanding that the demands are many on us now, so we can. I know we'll find a way that we can split this up so it works for everybody, and everyone's been so actively involved in the production of this information over the years. So I know we'll be able to wrap this up, but I think we just need another meeting to do it.
So Jelaine, Karen, I'm just gonna make a comment. It's obvious that everybody's pulled a lot of different directions, but as members of the committee, you guys have a responsibility to fulfill your role as committee members. So us not being able to have face-to-face meetings because of COVID has nothing to do with you guys being able to fulfill your role. And once again, at this meeting, Dave Sund is not in attendance. That has been an issue with multiple meetings that needs to be addressed. That's a resource that you guys need and a contribution to this effort that is needed and that needs to be addressed. This is why we're not making progress on this committee.
Can we address that issue
Has
today?
nothing to do with COVID.
Can we address the Dave Sund issue today?
Well, I see that we're at 10 o'clock, so I think the question is if we can extend for a few minutes for that, or if I think probably some clarification and a conversation to understand what the situation is there would be a place to start. So is that something we need to discuss as a committee?
I think so. My first question would be, did he communicate that he wasn't going to be at this meeting?
I did not see any excuse status on the
And
agenda.
Jen and I were not notified.
And has that been the pattern with all the other meetings? And
Some have been excused and some have not. In my recollection, I can go back and confirm that. And I want to just also confirm: do we have is one of the rules for committees that more than is there a number, a limited number? I believe there is, of unexcused absences.
3.
3. So 3 unexcused. And then is that an automatic result in a removal from the committee, not participating? Need to go back and check that rule.
Council, it has to go through council.
Your roles
through council.
are clearly defined on the website, and at that point that we get to that, it would go to council.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like, Barb, do you want to say anything else related to this?
I just was also questioning why he was late in getting his numbers for the community grants and what direction he was given to only allocate to 4 organizations.
So I can address that. This is Jennifer. He was on all of the emails and was given the same information that everyone else was. He never asked with any questions. He never said, I need help, I don't understand anything. I just followed up with Jelaine several times and pushed him a little harder the last few days, requesting the numbers, reminding him of the rules. You know, you can't give more to somebody, and just reiterated the same information from past emails. He did not provide an answer as to why he was late. He just said, sorry, I was late.
Thank you for following up with that.
So I think we can look back at the minutes and we can see, we can identify how many unexcused absences. That seems like a good step, information that we would want to have.
And then we make a request from our committee and we take it to council. Is that correct? That we request that he be removed from our committee?
Would that be the procedure?
Correct.
Do you want me to read the code?
Yeah, Jen can read the code to you.
A member of the committee may be removed by the city council after a hearing for misconduct or the non-performance of duty. A member who is absent for 3 meetings in a calendar year without an approved excuse is presumed to be in non-performance of duty, and the council shall declare the position vacant unless it finds otherwise following a hearing.
What code is that, so they can all pull it and look at it?
It's in our municipal code, and I can send you the information after the meeting. It's Title 2, Chapter 2.36, Parks and Community Services Committee.
Thank you. And then do we need to act then, do we need to make a decision on that at the next meeting? Is that the procedure?
I've never dealt with this procedure before, so I will seek direction to find out what steps need to be taken to proceed if that's what you guys want to do.
I would like to proceed with that at the next meeting.
Okay.
Can we hear from the members on that?
Okay.
I agree.
I agree.
If that's something that takes actions by us rather than being sort of mechanistic, that if a person is absent, then it goes directly to, if we have to take action to it, for it to happen, I would say yes.
Directly to council.
Okay,
If they send it to council, and the council just automatically.
agreed. And I think, I think just basing it on the number of unexcused absences is, it's important information. And then if we need to hear anything, if there's anything extenuating or anything that we need to hear, but I think the place to start is just with the guideline and the code as it's laid out, because that's clear and applies to everybody. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for
So,
taking the
Doreen,
extra
if you
time.
want to take just another 5 minutes and clarify anything on your community grants before we adjourn, this room is needed for interviews, so we need to
Yes.
wrap this up.
I understand. I was just going to move to that. I know that I think we're going to be taking an additional month with this. And I think certainly my questions were related to the kind of the outlier numbers that we received yesterday. So that's primarily what my focus of questions was going to be. If we are pushing this back a month, I think we can get this information related to the member. We can move forward and learn what that process is going to be. And then we can revisit our grants more in line with our regular process with that. I would say, and I wanted to put this out, if there are specific questions that people have for particular organizations, I know that was the case for me in one instance, that it would have been, because we didn't have our meetings with the people, we weren't able to ask those direct questions. But is there an opportunity to have a short Zoom meeting with any specific organizations if we have questions that we need to clarify? Is that something that's possible, or is that beyond our resources right now?
No, they can join our Zoom meeting next month if you guys want to ask specific questions of them. You just specifically invite them and ask them to join the meeting, and you can ask them whatever you need to during next month's meeting. My greater concern was, does everybody clearly understand how the funds are to be utilized? Did everybody understand the instructions? Was there any vagueness in it or something that was confusing that anybody did not get that caused them to make their selections? I noticed several of you had zeros. And so that's what I wanted to make sure everybody had a clear understanding.
So Jen, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
I need to go back through the instructions. Obviously, I did not read them carefully enough. And in going through the materials, in going through those, I wrote notes on some of the application materials saying, okay, so this is what you were going to do. What have you really done, or what are you going to do in the circumstances that we've really got? And if it seems like it would be useful in trying to decide to be able to present that kind of question to the organization and have them be prepared to say something at the next meeting. That may be not something that's manageable, but it seems like it would be useful if it were.
Since we weren't, this usually happened in our in-person meetings with the groups. Is this something we can submit specific questions and have Jen pass those on to the organizations so that they can answer them? Is that something we can do in writing and/or invite them to our next meeting?
This is Jennifer, and in the past, we've done that where we can identify questions, and I would send them out to the individual groups and say, these are the questions the committee had, please discuss it during your presentation. If you guys have specific questions you want to ask, if we can get those down, I can send them to them, they can email the answers, and they'll be in your packet next month.
That'd be awesome.
Very easy to do.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, does that feel sufficient to everybody? Will that meet everybody's need for questions and answers? And that, okay, it looks like, yeah, yes, Barb and Stacy, I can't see you're nodding.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. In terms of the numbers that were submitted yesterday by Dave, Jen, did you have a sense in your conversations with him, were there questions outlying, or did you have a chance to clarify kind of the process, if there were any, if it was muddy in any way? I just wonder if we need to revisit that with him prior to any of the other decisions that we're making.
I had no conversations with him after the last submittal. His first submittal came back with a higher amount, so I asked him to reduce it, explain to him that he can't go over the 90,000. And he said, okay, and then redid the numbers. So I think I'm going to need to have a phone call maybe with him instead of trying to do this through email, and try to work through those steps with him perhaps.
Yeah, Jelaine, I think as the committee chair, a phone call to Dave Sund is in order.
Okay. Jen, if you
Hi,
can,
Jelaine.
yeah, I hear that, and I'm happy to do that. Jen, I can coordinate with you on that and see if it makes sense. Yeah, if we both need to be in touch with him, or I'm happy to do that, and just to get some more information.
Okay.
And that call will be specific to the grant process and his understanding with that, and submittal on that. And I think the larger question is more a committee-wide discussion. Is that agreed?
I have a quick question. Are we going to allow him to resubmit after your conversations?
That's a good question. We had a deadline. Can we submit the numbers without? Because they were submitted well after the deadline. I don't know what our options are and what feels most equitable to folks.
I don't see any point in
I think that's
not.
part of your call to Dave, Jelaine, is that you clarify that he understood Jennifer's direction to him about resubmitting, keeping within the dollar amount. And then it's up to you guys as a committee if you're going to allow him to adjust that at this point and resubmit or not.
Because I won't likely have a chance to speak with the committee prior to our next meeting about that after I talk with him. I'd like
We're
to,
making that decision right now.
yeah, I'd like
We're
to
making the
get
decision
like
right
to get
now,
a
Jelaine.
feeling on that.
I move that we take Dave's recommendations out of our consideration for this year.
I second it.
Second it.
Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think there's
Okay,
clear
decision
direction
made.
on that
Need
also.
to adjourn, you guys.
Yep, and we're absent anything for good of the order.
Thank you.
Thank you for the extended time. Thanks for everybody, persevering with us. And I will be following up through Jen with some email about the ECFR. Thanks very much, everybody. Much appreciated.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks to everybody in the City Hall
Thank you.
crew. Okay, bye-bye.
Aye.